All right, well, we'll get rolling in 3, 2, 1. Well, Eddie Carvacho is the color analyst for Nashville SC's radio broadcasts, but it is one of many hats that he has worn throughout his soccer life. He is the head of the Tennessee United Soccer Club. He has been a goalkeeper in professional soccer in Nashville, a goalkeeper's coach at the MLS level, a multicultural marketer and consultant. He has done just about everything. Eddie, did I get all that right, and what did I miss?
No, you did a fantastic job in the opening. So, what did you miss? I do a crazy Elmo voice, but that's not ours. Yeah.
That would get you kicked off the podcast real fast. So we'll move on, and maybe the radio broadcast.
Just because we have high standards for Elmo voices, that's the only reason why.
No Elmo voice then. Okay.
Well, Eddie, you and I have worked together now, gosh, for the better part of 5 years on and off in the radio booth. First for Nashville SC in USL. You had another role, actually, as a match analyst for the last couple of years for MLS, working Nashville SC matches. Now you're back in the booth with me, and I thought it was a great chance for our audience to get to know you a little bit, and for some to get to know you a little bit better. So before we talk about Nashville SC this year, before we talk about the new stadium, just tell us your soccer story. How'd you get to where you are now?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I think it's a great opportunity just to, as you mentioned, get a chance to not only fans to get to know a little bit of my background and what could I bring to a radio broadcast, but also, to your point, a little bit of a perspective, and get to know the fans too. It's an incredible ride. It's been an incredible ride. I came here in 1995. My wife and I have actually met in college. My wife played basketball. I played soccer at the University of South Alabama, and I had just and then of course the plan was always to move home. She's born and raised in Nashville. So in 1995 we got married, and I made Nashville our home. So obviously with a background in the game, grew up in Chile, born in the U.S., raised in Chile, came back when I was 19 with a $500 in my pocket, a one-way ticket that my dad bought. So basically, you're not coming back. I had to make it on my own, man. And so I was coming where I grew up in Chile. Soccer is everything, obviously. And I was able to really I was pretty tall. I'm 6'3", so for a Chilean, that is not normal. And but I was a goalkeeper, and I was part of the youth program of a professional team, kind of a hometown team per se. And so at 18 years old, 17, 18, I get moved into the first team, and that's when I realized, wow, okay, maybe I do have something here, and maybe I do, but I was the fourth goalkeeper because obviously I'm the young guy, I am the guy playing the U20, U19 goalkeeper. But it was a great experience. But I always had this vision that I wanted to migrate back to the U.S., to my country. So, because I figured the land of opportunities, and so the good news is that all I needed was to renew my U.S. passport, and I was able to come to the U.S. So I did that when I was 19, like I mentioned, one-way ticket, $500. I landed in Miami, and my dad has set me up with one of his old friends. They picked me up at the airport, and they put me in this apartment with 7 other guys. And it was like, okay, this is America, right? So you start living the dream in a way, and at a young age. So fast forward, I meet some people in Miami. I'm playing in the adult leagues, but my goal was always like, oh my God, I want to play professional in the U.S. That's what I want to do. And of course, when I get here, I come to a point where the NASL had died. I came here in '86, back to the U.S., dead. There's a gap. There's nowhere to go. And one of the guys that I was playing in the adult leagues in Miami said, hey, why don't you play college? I'm like, what is that? Well, go play college soccer. Like, are you serious? Can I? Oh, by the way, when I came to the U.S., I couldn't speak English. So I'm like, oh, how do I get through that? It's like, well, anyway, long story short, South Alabama is a Division I school. We were really, really good in the 80s and the late 80s and 90s, Division top 20. A lot of Icelandic players and great teammates and all that. And then I walked on. And here's this guy who couldn't speak English with an Irish coach, which I couldn't understand what he was saying, but I only knew one word, and I said it's scholarship. That's the only word I knew. And it just a lot of faith and hope. And then next thing you know, I am now playing, and I have a very good career. I was an All-American was invited to the U.S. national team in the 90s under Bob Gansler, and later Bora Milutinovic calls me into the camp as well. The days of Tony Meola, Casey Keller, goalkeeping, right? In that early 90s for the 1990, Dave Vanoli, some great names and good people. And so again, I was always kind of like part of that group. Unfortunately, never broke into a game. I did sit on the bench in the game of U.S. versus Jamaica in North Carolina, but Mark Dodd actually played a game and didn't get to play. My gosh, I just wanted one cap. That's all I wanted. I couldn't get it. So, but then again, if you look at the history, the trajectory of soccer in America, you're talking about that back then, college soccer was basically the only thing you could do. I mean, you look at the 1990 World Cup, and 3/4 of that team it was made out of, or even leading into the 1994 World Cup, because they kept saying, hey, FIFA had mandated to U.S. soccer that they needed to have a professional league. And so 90, 91, 92, like, okay, just hang in there. It's going to come. The league never came in 93. World Cup now is 94. That roster, 3/4 of that roster were former college, my age, Foley College, like Marcelo Balboa, Eddie Guinalda, Tom Ramos, and you go on, right? And where those guys were hired by the federation, and to give them like 35, 40,000 so they could have full-time players because there was nowhere to play, and there were tour. Anyway, 94 comes, still no MLS. It was not until 96 the MLS starts, right? So I'm part of that generation of, and I hate to say them, I don't know if it's a lost generation, but my goodness, if I was in the 4th, 5th, 6th goalkeeper into this pool of goalkeepers for the national team, I got to believe that if there wasn't MLS, I would have had a team to play, you know? And so again, that's kind of a little bit of my background and the story and how all this starts and how do I get so much involved in the game. And obviously now it's 95. I couldn't wait for the league anymore. I had to go get a job. Come on, let's go. Now remember, I'm still on my own here. Mom and dad are not here. They're still in Chile. So now I'm out of college, graduate, marketing, international business degree. The first one in my family to graduate from college, and I'm in the U.S. And I'm like, where's home? Well, home is where at that point, my fiance or my wife now was Nashville. So in 95, got tired of waiting for the league, get a real job. We move in, and then that's how I get started again. And I love the game so much that I quit my job and started my own coaching career, youth side, and being a trainer in summer camps and really get involved in it. And a little bit of if you ask some people of my age, been here for a long time, I was a little bit ahead of time. I was somewhat of a trailblazer because I had an A license, the highest license at that time for U.S. soccer. So I also, again, very immersed on that. And now the immersion in Nashville, 95 and, 6, 97, 98. Then I go on into college to Clemson. I was an assistant coach. But the plan was always to try to come back home. So in 2017, it was time to come back home. And I've been here since.
And as part of that journey, you spent some time in MLS as a goalkeeper's coach, as a member of the front office. I think you were actually on the FC Dallas side of things at the MLS Cup that Gary Smith won, right? Back in 2010. With Columbus as well. You were sharing your stories of being at MLS Cup out in LA and Carson, of course, where Nashville SC was this past weekend. What has that experience brought you as you now are in the broadcast booth and are understanding? And every time we talk, we were talking about DC United and Chad Ashton, the interim, and you're like, oh yeah, I played with him in Colorado. Like it seems like if you don't know the person, you're a degree of separation away from knowing the person in MLS. How has that helped you in the broadcast booth and in your academy coaching career?
Well, and I think and you just mentioned it's the soccer community. It's so tight. So only a few degrees separate. It's like Kevin Bacon thing, right? You're only a 6 degree separation, and you can know anyone, right? And you'll get to the destination. No, it's been very rewarding, right? You mentioned MLS, so after college, collegiate coaching, or while I was coaching, I went back into the youth side, and then I get a call up by a very good friend at that point, Greg Andrulis. Greg was the interim head coach of the Columbus Crew at that point. they had fired Tom Fitzgerald, with rest in peace. He was one of the first initial coaches in this league, successful and down in Tampa, University of Tampa. And they said, hey, listen, I'm looking for a goalkeeper coach. I've known you for so many years. I trust and know you're so much knowledge, and I'd love to have you on the staff. And I'm like, I'm there tomorrow. Let's go. And so I moved to Columbus with my family and be part of the coaching staff. And in a very different time, Columbus was the very first soccer-specific stadium. And if you've ever been there, it's a glorified high school stadium, but it has so, in terms of infrastructure. And of course, I compare it to Geodis Park the other day. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Here's the upscale side of it, of town. But again, that's the evolution of this league. This league has evolved so much from the players, needless to say, from compensation, coaching staff. Oh my God, so many stories about, the things that we went through and how this has evolved. So I think it's been a great journey. How does that help me with the broadcast? Is that I think I bring a perspective. I bring that coach side perspective, insights on how maybe the locker room, how players, what do front office go through, the management side of things. There's a lot of things that behind the scenes. Needless to say, we have a structure, a milestone, or a landmark like a brand new stadium in Nashville. But my goodness, there's so much behind that, so much heritage and so much story. And, and I don't want to, you mentioned, we were talking the other day, and when I went to the stadium, I got a little teared, and I'm like, wow, I got this feeling when I walked in and I see the stadium, and I'm like, and right away I went back into when I played in Nashville down at Geodis Park.
Little different.
With the jail right on top of the hill. Look at how we were training or playing, or when we were at one point at Tennessee Rhythm, because there were some issues with the Metros and the name and the ownership. And which big shout out to Lynn Agee and the vendor Sandu, man. Those guys grabbed the bull by the horn, and they wanted to provide some kind of an experience. There's a lot of guys in town. Many people move from out of town to play for that group in those years, and they stay. They're still around. Maybe their fans they're going to be there this weekend, but those initial it gives you so much perspective, and that's what I try to do in the broadcast, is to compare those things, a little bit of the history and how things are today, and not to get too high on the wins, not to get too low in the losses, but to bring everything that where soccer is in this country in terms of a foothold, but also locally now, the value of having this professional league. And so proud, man. It's been amazing just at the evolution of the game. So I want to share that with as many people as possible.
When you look at where soccer has been, not just in Nashville, playing at Geodis Park, now they're playing in a 30,000 seat stadium this weekend, but around the country too. You kind of mentioned, when MLS was a young league, you basically knew everybody in the league practically. And nowadays there are so many different pathways for either young players or for guys coming into the league from abroad in different ways than there have ever been before. How much have you kind of, I guess, had a front row seat to seeing the way, not just the league, but the game has grown in this country?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, it's tremendous. I mean, think about it. The way how I got to the national team back in the early 90s, it was through college. I had an amazing my junior year, point whatever. And I was like All-American and, got my team into, similar to how, you view any other collegiate sport like basketball, the impact of football and basketball into the professional. But it was such a weird feeling because it didn't matter how well you did, because there was nothing unless you went overseas. And many of the guys into that, 98, 2002 World Cup were American players who actually went abroad, right? If you look at it. So if you wanted to grow and if you wanted to have somewhat of an environment conducive for professional growth, it had to be overseas. Well, if you didn't have that opportunity, or if you're not like that very top elite part of the pyramid that you could get a work permit back then, or you had a relative, a grandfather, a father who can give a national passport, that was it. Today, look at today. look what FC Dallas, and I use FC Dallas because I work for FC Dallas, and I see, I've seen it, and I shared across. My office was across of Oscar Pareja. Oscar, now current coach of Orlando City. He was the brains, or he was the first guy to really get this academy system, where now the ownership can, how much money has Dan Hunt and the FC Dallas ownership gotten just selling players from the academy? Just Pepe's just the last one for 20 million. But we were just doing the math the other day. Is it at 40 or 50 million probably?
Yeah.
In transfers. So again, the progression of that, the quality of coaching, the emphasis, the professionalism. But everything started really the day that American soccer went from pay to play to fully funded. Once now you started to get this MLS clubs, or a lot of the clubs get into the where the club would actually pay for everything, you started to now really focus. And this is something my son, I have a 25-year-old son who plays professional basketball in Europe, who started playing soccer. And him and I, we were looking at the national team game several months or a couple of weeks ago, and all of a sudden we look around and we go, look how awesome to see so many African-American players in the national team roster. Look at the diversity of our national team. Again, not want to go into, this is not a racial thing. I'm just comparing my 1990-94 World Cup, when we had a few Hispanics and maybe Desmond Armstrong, African-American here and there, Kobe Jones, to where now we were looking at the starting lineup against Panama. It's like, my goodness, it was 90%, right? Close to 90. And I think that is the future of America, continue the diversity and bringing more players into it. And I think that's been possible because of the efforts done at the urban outreach and the community outreach, but also the game has grown so much that now it's hip, right? It's a cultural thing too.
Yeah.
The exposure of media, where now they can see a Messi, they can see a Ronaldo. These kids grew up watching the best of the best every weekend and hearing that they can get paid $2, $3, $4, $5 million a year, $10 million a year. If you play in the EPL with wages of $150,000 a week, like, whoa, okay, that's hip, that's cool. So it's been really an amazing journey just to see all that develop.
You were a part of that growth process of the game in the U.S., and now you've been a party to Nashville SC doing the same at the local level here, starting in USL, building this MLS club, now building an academy to support that. And so I'm wondering now, as you're seeing where this club is in year 3 of its growth project in Major League Soccer, is this team one that you think is built to compete for a championship this year? And what is it going to take on the pitch for it to get to where I don't think anybody expected it would already be here in year 3, but where it would like to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you and I bounced off a little bit during our broadcast, and even this past game, I was trying to find something, and I was before the game and, during the week as we prepare for the game, and you actually call it out that I was very bullish what I said, but I felt like if, Nashville, for example, I was trying to encapsulate what this 8 games would feel like from externally, right? If they would have won, get another 3 points, now is Nashville the team to beat, right? Remember I brought that up, and you're like, whoa, that's kind of strong. It's like, well, if you go on the road and you just put the stake and you go like, hey, that fear from the home, like, oh no, man, we're playing Nashville and all that. It's a good question. I think obviously they are competitive and they will continue to be competitive, but I feel right now where they are in their birth and where they are right now, it's still somewhat, for me, somewhat of a lot of unknowns. It's the inconsistency. It's almost like, a child, right? Can't expect to be very mature when you're 6 years old. Well, you gotta make mature decisions. But Dad, I'm only 5. It's that mentality but I wanted it so bad because you have shown to me that you have made some good decisions. Yeah, but I'm still a kid. So it's that mentality also as you, and I think it's definitely a work in progress. I still argue that maybe 11 points. Oh, everybody's like, great. Yeah, great when you look at it. But, man, we left points on the table. There's some games like, what if we had 15 points? Does that now sense a different tone to the league? Because it changes psychologically, that coaching staff, those players knowing that, oh, my gosh, we're playing Nashville. And that's the little edge. We all know that the margin of error in this league is so thin. And you're always looking for that extra edge. So when we're talking about edge, is it time for Nashville to really establish themselves as that consistent competitor, winner? You're playing in your face. Are we two DP players away? It's the quality. I think Mike Jacobs has done a fantastic job of assembling this team in such a short amount of time and being competitive right away. And I know I'm calling a little bit about the consistency. They have been consistent since they've been in MLS, but to take that step, right, to be that step up, it needs just, and we all know, it needs to probably those 2 or 3 more experienced guys that you can count in and out, and not hope that maybe they have a good game or hope that they're going to go through a good stretch, although players go through up and downs, and we all know that. But just when they look at it, not just on paper, like, teams on the other side going, that terrified feeling of like, we're going to get sucked in, we're going to get, like choked up, and, we got to find a different way to win this. And I think Nashville's heading that way.
When you guys look at who the opponent is going to be this weekend, Philadelphia Union, one of the most consistent clubs in this league, set a points record just a couple of years ago. Do you think they have the opportunity to send a message to the league, as they open the park, or is it okay, inaugural game, whatever they do, it's going to kind of have that, okay, maybe they got the bonus from that kind of first game atmosphere?
Well, I think, it goes back to our fan base. I have to do a better job of getting to social media, and I was talking to Wes about that, and I'm trying to figure out who to kind of listen. But then, now that I'm in the radio and, there's people following, and I got to, the fact that I went on Twitter just a little bit the other night, and then there was some feeling, or there was some sentiment from fans that maybe Gary Smith should be fired. Like, wow, okay.
Come on.
Wow, okay. I understand you may not like the style. You may be sometimes, and obviously, the game in LA was not the best, reflection. And that again shows a little bit of that. What do I expect as a fan? And I think it comes down to that, right? For this weekend, I think there's going to be so many fans that are going to be just embracing the moment. It's a historical moment for the franchise, for the city of Nashville. It's how many of the fans are just going to go like, hey, the result is secondary. I just want to soak in everything. But we all know that we have our great hardcore fans that it's all about, got to get the W and the 3 points, and we're at home, and what a great opportunity. Because one of the things that you look from a point system, shoot, you're at home. You're supposed to win your home games. But because you have a little bit of this savings account, you have this extra points that you got when in this road trip, can you afford to kind of, give a couple points away this weekend? It's a tie. But then again, it's that, Vanderbilt homecoming playing Alabama. Is that the same? Probably not. It's not the same feeling. But they're going to be fans. They're going to be just happy with, being in the moment, being historical, being in the first open. And it's a lot of new fans in this town. People have moved over the years. So it's just a matter of perspective. And again, but to your point, to your question, getting a win against Philadelphia, you're getting closer again to what I said last week in the broadcast. Is Nashville the team to beat? And I think that is not added pressure. I think all our players are all professionals. They're mature. They know what to want. That swag, that edge is what moves teams. Just a not, when people get ready to play Manchester City or, like, oof, okay. I'm not suggesting we are or we should be Manchester City, but it's a feeling. It's a statement. And a win on this weekend, it can set that statement to the league.
Better to be Manchester City than to be Vanderbilt, to work with your two analogies you worked in right there. It'll be different than a Vanderbilt game, by the way, because it's going to be a full stadium. So that's one distinction I can make right there. Sorry, Tennessee grad.
But they're getting better. They're growing.
That's true.
By the way, kudos to Vanderbilt Athletic. They're adding women's volleyball. Good job.
Well, that's great to hear. And, of course, near and dear to your heart, since your daughter's a volleyball player at UVA.
That's correct. Well done. We're overdue.
So we'll close out with I want you to go a little deeper into something you expressed earlier. You and I were walking through the stadium together on your first visit to the Finnish facility here recently, and you were getting choked up, as you referenced, seeing where Nashville soccer has come from the Nashville Metro's days and playing at Geodis Park. And now when you're in that stadium on Sunday, what will your thought process be as 30,000 fans sing the club anthem and open this place? And what does it say for the future of soccer in Nashville that Geodis Park, 30,000 seats, exists right in the heart of this town?
I mean, it's everything, right? It's everything. If you're a soccer fan, if you're a purist of the game, and if you have any kind of background, and like I do, coming, like again, you use Geodis Park, and we play some games down in a high school down in Franklin, but in the old Franklin, when the team changed to rhythm, it's an interesting thing because I try to put into perspective, and I had a hard time. But then again, it was a little easier for me because I had the opportunity as being an MLS coach to travel to a lot of these facilities and to see the stadiums. And, I was very fortunate when I was in the league. Some teams still were playing in NFL stadiums like Kansas City. Back then it was the Wiz. Remember that? And New England Revolution hasn't moved from Gillette. New York used to play, the Metro Stars used to play in the Meadowlands. So it gave you a perspective, and there was nothing better. Although Columbus was such a soccer specific stadium, the first one. And now
it was very, very, this is a stadium at the state fairgrounds in a lot of ways. Yeah.
In many ways. Yeah. But it had this aura. If you were a soccer person, purist, you appreciated it because it was just for soccer, right? And very, very inexpensive, very, just metal and some concrete and so forth. But it gave you a little bit of that aura of like, we're heading in the right direction. And to be able to walk into Geodis Park and to just see angles into my first thing was like, oh my gosh, there's not a bad seat in the stadium. I actually would love to be on the, if I get a ticket to the top, I would have loved to just be on the top, right? When the supporters are standing and you're in that next deck at the top, I'm like, man, that would be just to get all that energy and all that singing and all that emotion and passion. Oh my God, it's got to be it's going to be a great experience. So, it's one of those that you just bring the perspective and see how far it is. And what it means to Nashville is it's now we're in a trajectory and we were talking about this, Wes, the other day, just what Nashville has done at the youth side of it, building the academy. They're building their residential program where now they're going to be able to, really try to attract players from all over the country because the league is easing up on their, territorial where you can go, what you can do. But man, the next milestone is to get that first kid who came from the academy and starts for Nashville, that homegrown. That it's coming. The guys are working really, really hard. We have the relationship with Nashville SC, the academy, Kevin Flanagan and the coaching staff there. And our club has contributed with probably 8 or 10 players already to it. Which is
thank you for your sacrifice.
Which is why we do it, right? We do it to just provide that, to try to polish a little bit of that diamond in the rough. But then again, now they go to this next level. And I was just talking to a couple of parents over this weekend that kids they used to be in our club, that are with NSC, who came because they have younger siblings still in the club. You know, they live here, and they were sharing their experience when they were playing in Texas, in Frisco, in the GA Cup. They play Celtic, and they play Flamengo, and they play. Tim, you were asking me earlier in terms of player development and where American players. Imagine now those 14, 15-year-olds getting that kind of experience. 20 years ago, that wasn't there unless you paid for it and you were in a club that really giving up, or you went to a tournament. Now you're doing it 50, 48 weeks out of the year. So it's only accelerating. And I think that our U.S. national team is a reflection of that. So being able to do that now at a local level, on a non-traditional state for soccer. And we're not viewed, Tennessee is not viewed as a hotbed of soccer. It is not viewed. As a matter of fact, you know, some of the elite people, you know, they don't treat Nashville or Tennessee very well. Like, well, you know, it's this. They're not that, but we're getting so much better on that. And I can't wait to see that first player, you know, homegrown, make his professional debut with Nashville SC jersey.
I can't think of many people, maybe anybody, who has a better perspective on the past, the present, and the future of Nashville soccer than you, Eddie. And I think those who want to follow an expert voice on all three of those things, they should look him up. Gigantico Biz on Twitter, right?
Well, if you see me, I'm pretty gigantico, you know. And actually, you know, it's a little bit on the business side of things. I think I'm committing. I need to be better in social media, better kind of start bringing my perspective, my opinion. But the logo is the stone face of the Easter Island. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Well, if I turn sideways, dude, that's me. You know? So that's almost like a picture of myself. But no,
I like it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it for your time. And anytime, you know, I'm here, and I'm looking forward to get more exposure, and I appreciate you guys providing your platform to at least get to say hello to some of the Nashville SC fans.
Sounds great. Thanks again. We'll talk to you on the air here soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, Tim.